Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on the channel today. I'm Ted Yacucci. Well, the topic of our video is who are the five people that needed to be removed? Who are the five people that needed to be murdered by the conspirators in the JFK assassination? But in order to be able to make that determination, it really becomes time dependent, doesn't it? Because, in other words, the people that needed to be possibly removed or murdered by the conspirators would have been quite different immediately in the days after the assassination took place versus after the Warren Commission had already met and put out their report. Well, for our purposes today, we're going to talk about after the Warren Commission met and put out their report. And that will be the focus of our video. Who needed to go, really needed to go, and why in the minds of the conspirators. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about who needed to go immediately. So in order to accomplish that, let's pretend you and I are part of the conspirators that met and took part in the murder, the assassination of John Kennedy. Okay, so let's pretend that it's about 3 a.m. on November 23rd, 1963. Henry Wade has now just finished his midnight news conference, and the world has met Lee Oswald and heard a little bit from him. Now, the problem for us, the conspirators, is that they met an alive Lee Oswald. They did not see pictures of Lee Oswald the way it was supposed to be, in which he would have been killed right after the assassination took place, or at the very least in the next couple of hours after the assassination took place. So we're in a panic. Basically, we're in a big panic because we know Oswald can blow everything wide open. We know that if he talks, and he will talk because he realizes by now that he's a lone patsy and he has been set up, and he's actually been working to stop any assassination attempts on the president, as he probably accomplished in Chicago just 3 weeks earlier. So what do? Well, we've heard from Alan Dulles. He's at the farm in Northern Virginia. He'll be there all weekend, even though he's supposed to have been retired a year or two ago. We know he's still running things. He's at the farm in Northern Virginia, and he's not a happy camper at this point. Either is Carlos Marcello, either is Harrelson Hunt, and a whole lot of people that we know we don't want to make upset. So what is the plan? Well, we've all decided that since the mafia end of the operation was to take care of Lee Oswald, then we know that it's their responsibility to now put some kind of a plan in place. And the man that everybody has decided on is Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby is about as deep into the mafia and the CIA as you can get. He's been a gun runner both to Batista and to Fidel Castro for the CIA and the mafia. That just depends on which side we were on at the time. And he's also been a distributor of arms from a lot of U.S. Army armories that have experienced thefts over the past year. He's right in the middle of distributing those arms to anti-Castro Cubans who are now training illegally along Lake Pontchartrain and other areas across the country. So Jack Ruby has been told that he will be an American hero, that he will be taken care of, that his family will be taken care of, that he will not spend much time in jail, and he is not asked to do the job. He is told that he will do the job, and he well knows the ramifications of what will happen if he refuses. That is not a possibility. All right, so the day after Saturday is Sunday, and Sunday morning, Jack Ruby, thankfully, in our case, we are very, very much put at ease because Oswald has finally been eliminated. So that part of the plan has come into being. So who now moves up on our list? Well, it's going to be a lot of people that were involved in the Tippit killing, isn't it? So we know that Eddie Benavides, whose brother Dom Benavides has witnessed the killing of Tippit and has said that it was not Lee Oswald, definitely not Lee Oswald, who was one of the participants in the Tippit killing. Well, his brother Eddie Benavides looks a lot like him. He is killed in a bar fight amazingly, and all of a sudden Dom Benavides gets the message. People like Hank Killam, who is a house painter by trade, and he is someone that is he has been married to someone who works for Jack Ruby. He's done work where Lee Oswald lived in Oak Cliff. He is in the middle of a lot. He knows a lot. We know that he knows a lot, and he will be moved way up on the list, and he will be killed amazingly at 4 a.m. After jumping through a plate glass window. Another witness to the J.D. Tippit killing was Warren Reynolds. Reynolds didn't see the actual murder, but he saw one of the participants of the murder of Tippit running away. He was on the south side of Jefferson Boulevard, and he initially stated that that man that he saw was definitely not Lee Oswald. Well, just about a few weeks later, on January 23rd, 1964, Warren Reynolds was in the basement of his establishment. He was shot in the head. The man that was arrested for that shooting, Daryl Garner, was given an alibi by his girlfriend, Betty Mooney McDonald, who had worked for Jack Ruby. And she was then found hanged in her jail cell. So, as you can imagine, Warren Reynolds changed his tune and said that, oh, yeah, heck, it was Lee Oswald after all that he saw running away from the Tippit killing. So our priority of who we needed to have removed as conspirators certainly was changing up until the time that the Warren Commission took place. But now let's move into after the Warren Commission report came out, and let's talk about the 5 people that at that point we really needed to have gone, to be murdered. And I think number 1 might surprise you who that is, in my opinion. All right, number 5 is Jack Ruby. You may have thought Ruby would be further up the list earlier, but remember, Jack Ruby is severely compromised. He has been right in the middle of the JFK assassination planning, moving money and people and helping to set up the schedule. And even more importantly, he is mafia controlled. He knows what happens when the mafia want people gone, and he has every reason to give them no reason to think that he may become an informer. Secondly, he is in Dallas County Jail, and he knows that the Dallas police can reach him anytime. But now things have changed a bit. Jack Ruby has been granted a new trial. Now, remember that we're pretending we're conspirators, and we conspirators are worried that he is getting loose with his lips. This was reinforced when he gave an interview to Dorothy Kilgallen, one of the best-known journalists and newspaper columnists in the country. So what do we, the conspirators, do? Well, we bring in Dr. Lewis Jolyon West, one of the MK Ultra doctors, to treat Jack Ruby. Dr. West is a prominent psychiatrist who was contracted for MK Ultra, a CIA mind control program in the 50s and 60s. He has diagnosed Jack Ruby as psychotic and delusional. He's recommended further interrogation under the influence of sodium thiopental and hypnosis. Dallas Deputy Sheriff Al Maddox, who met Jack Ruby, said, Well, they injected me for a cold, and it was cancer cells. That's what he told me, Ruby did. Remembering that Jack Ruby knew that Lee Oswald was connected with David Ferry and Dr. Mary Sherman of the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans, where Dr. Sherman was using one of the few particle accelerators in the world at that time to try and engineer fast-working cancer virus to assassinate Fidel Castro. So Jack Ruby at number 5 had to go, and he died of cancer just 1 month after being diagnosed with the disease and before his second trial could be held. Numbers 4 and 3 are connected. The Warren Report had been released, and more people were realizing that the report not only had omitted a lot of witnesses and materials that it should have covered, but the report also seemed to have changed witness testimony to try and justify the conclusion of a lone shooter. Journalists like Seth Cantor, who spoke to Jack Ruby at Parkland Hospital right after the assassination, found his testimony changed. The men who found and handled the so-called magic bullet found their testimony changed. Even some FBI agents were quoted in the report as having performed duties or signed affidavits that they clearly did not do. And two very good journalists named Jim Coth and Bill Hunter were both in the advanced stages of writing books about the JFK assassination that would reveal information the conspirators were very worried about. Jim Coates was a young reporter for the Dallas Times-Herald. Bill Hunter had also been a news reporter. He worked for the Long Beach Independent Press Telegram. Both were covering the assassination story. Now, what's interesting about this, and the reason that they're number 4 and number 3, besides the fact that both had information that we, the conspirators, couldn't be sure about, but what we did know was both Hunter and Coth were in Jack Ruby's apartment the night he shot Lee Oswald. He was there along with Ruby's roommate, George Senator, and Ruby's attorney, Tom Howard. Reporter Coth was killed by a karate chop to the neck as he was emerging from the shower in his bathroom. And his notes on the assassination for his planned book were never found. That same year, 1964, at approximately 2 a.m. on the morning of April 23rd, Bill Hunter was sitting at his desk in the press room of the Long Beach police station reading a mystery novel when two detectives, both who were later described as friends of Hunter, came into the room. Initially, there was considerable confusion over exactly what happened. One officer was first quoted as saying he dropped his gun, causing it to discharge as it struck the floor. Later, he changed his story to say that he and the other detective were engaged in horseplay with their loaded weapons when the tragedy occurred. Bill Hunter was shot directly in the heart and died immediately. Number 2 was Lieutenant Commander William Pitzer. Pitzer had a prime role in the documentation of records from President Kennedy's autopsy, and he was reportedly well aware that the wounds had been altered. He died just a few days before his retirement from the Navy. He was also looking forward to a high-paying job with one of the television networks, and he was said to be planning to expose the problems with the JFK autopsy. Pitzer, who was an X-ray technician by trade, filmed the Kennedy autopsy. He told friends after that autopsy that he was debriefed by persons unknown from the intelligence community, who basically threatened and intimidated him to remain silent about what he had witnessed. He told friends that this experience was horrifying and stated that he was visited periodically by military personnel who reminded him repeatedly never to reveal, for reasons of national security, what he saw while taking pictures. Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Marvin, a decorated war hero, has testified and written extensively about how he was requested by the CIA to assassinate Lieutenant Commander Pitzer. And again, as one of the conspirators, one of the reasons that we were so worried about Lieutenant Commander Pitzer and had to make sure that he was eliminated was because it is rumored that he actually had 16 millimeter film that he had taken of the autopsy. Not slides, but actual 16 millimeter film. If true, a very clear indication that the autopsy had indeed been doctored. Several friends of William Pitzer claim that they had seen both the 16 millimeter film and slides that Pitzer had put together that clearly showed an entrance wound from the front and the back of President Kennedy's head blown nearly completely away. Lieutenant Commander William Pitzer could be handled and controlled as long as he was in the Navy, but when he was close to retiring, he had to be eliminated. He is number. And now we come to number one. And I think this may surprise you just a little bit. But I think this person at number one was the single greatest threat to the conspirators who killed President John Kennedy. And I think that man was Mr. Lee Bowers. Lee Bowers, as you probably know, was the railroad supervisor who was in his 12 or 14-foot tower overlooking Dealey Plaza. He could see easily the parking lot right in front of him. He could see the plaza. He could see the grassy knoll. And he told the Warren Commission and he told interviewers information that no one else had. And I think that's what made him such a threat to the conspirators. Let's go over it a little bit. What he said he saw was 3 cars pull into the parking area in the 30 or 35 minutes before the assassination. The second car, he said the driver had a microphone or telephone of some kind up to his mouth, holding it with one hand and driving with the other. He said he also saw 2 men on the grassy knoll about 10 or 15 feet apart from each other. But what's really important, what's really crucial and critical here is he said he heard 3 shots very, very clearly, and shots number 2 and 3 were in extremely rapid succession, kind of like bang, bang.
Mr. Bowers, how many shots did you hear?
There were 3 shots, and these were spaced with 1 shot, then a pause, and then 2 shots in very close order, such as perhaps almost on top of each other, while there was some pause between the first and the second shots.
Did you tell that to the Dallas police?
Yes, I told this to the police, and then also told it to the FBI, and also I had a discussion 2 or 3 days later with him concerning this, and they made no comment other than the fact that when I stated I felt like the second and third shots could not have been fired from the same rifle, they reminded me that I wasn't an expert, and I had to agree.
What that means is that no bolt-action rifle would have been able to fire shots in that rapid succession. So the whole story about Lee Oswald firing 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository kind of falls apart. And Lee Bowers, he did testify to that before the Warren Commission. And what did the Warren Commission do? They sent him off on a whole new direction. They didn't ask him any questions when he said how quickly the succession was from between the second and third shot. They actually asked him questions off in a whole new direction, something the Warren Commission often did when they didn't want him to get into testimony that would negate their lone nut shooter theory. So, what happened to Lee Bowers? Well, according to his wife, he was threatened, as many witnesses were, after he testified before the Warren Commission. He was told not to talk anymore. Also, I forgot to say that Lee Bowers also saw some kind of activity on the knoll when he heard the shots. He said it was either a puff of smoke or maybe a shooter. He couldn't be sure. Now, Lee Bowers' friends say that they think and they're very sure that Lee Bowers actually saw more than he claimed, but because of the threats that he had received, that's as far as he would go. Anyway, remember, the conspirators didn't know at this time whether there would actually be a trial. They had done such a wild, massive conspiracy, and it was the President of the United States. So they were still trying to protect their butts, is really what they were doing. So in 1966, they decided that Lee Bowers was too much of a risk. He was on his way through Midlothian, Texas. He was about a couple miles outside of town, and his car was run off the road, according to a witness. A black car ran him off the road and into an abutment. He didn't die right away. He lasted about 4 hours, and he told the people inside the ambulance that he thought he had been drugged when he stopped for coffee a few miles back. There was a physician inside the ambulance with him, and that physician said that he had never seen any kind of a strange shock like Lee Bowers was in. No other accident victim had displayed the characteristics of that kind of shock. So Lee Bowers, who really was in a position, and he was a very honest, believable person, and he had given that information to Mark Lane, which is in a pretty famous interview. And I think the conspirators, they were more worried about Mr. Bowers, I think, than just about anyone else. And that's why after the Warren Commission report came out, I think even though it took a couple of years, between 1963 and 1966, I think he was always the number one target, and I think they were just waiting for the correct time to get him.